At the very end of the Clone Wars, we see the clone troopers carry out Order 66, which is arguably one of the most morally ambiguous things they ever did. This involved betraying their comrades that they'd been fighting a war with for years. But what exactly is Order 66 and what enabled the clones to carry out this heartless act? Today we'll talk about the Order 66 contingency protocol and the inhibitor chips. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So, the clones carrying out Order 66 is arguably one of the most heart-wrenching scenes in all of Star Wars. Especially after having seen the Clone Wars TV show and seeing the bond built between the Jedi and the troops that served underneath them. Watching these troopers betray their Jedi commanders is heartbreaking. How exactly can these 100% loyal soldiers carry out this horrific order? Well, it comes down to a few key components that had to work together to allow this awful event to happen. So let's start with Order 66 itself. Now, as the name suggests, there are a lot of other contingency orders. Order 66 is just one of many orders that could be administered by the Office of the Chancellor to the Grand Army of the Republic. And some of these, by the way, are administered by other political bodies. For example, there was a contingency order in place for the Chancellor going rogue or becoming unfit for office. Some of these involved him being arrested or even killed by his own soldiers. But Order 66 in particular is one specifically designed for a Jedi rebellion against the Republic. It basically designated any member of the Jedi Order as an enemy of the Republic. And while it was likely installed by Palpatine to be part of his plan for dismantling the Jedi Order, it was actually not entirely based around that. It merely deals with the possibility that the Jedi may not be 100% loyal to the political body they say they are. So Order 66 is just one of many contingency orders in place within the Republic military. But as rigid as this series of contingency orders is, it still seems very difficult to get these loyal soldiers to betray the people they had been fighting alongside for years. How exactly do you get this army to follow this order? Well, that's where the inhibitor chips come in. The inhibitor chips are a biological modification made to the clone troopers fairly early in their development. This chip did a wide variety of things. It was designed, for example, to make them more docile, to affect the way they think and make them more submissive to commands coming from the Republic. After all, they're clones of Jango Fett, a relatively loose cannon bounty hunter. This modification had to be made to keep them docile and obedient, especially during a large galactic conflict. Well, this same chip could be utilized to activate Order 66. I should add, by the way, that this isn't a computerized microchip, but instead a biological chip. And while they weren't grown within the clone troopers, they were very natural within the clone troopers' brains, and were present in every soldier within the Grand Army of the Republic. Now, while nearly all, or really in reality all of these chips were activated when Order 66 was given, we know of a few of them that did malfunction and trigger that order a little bit early. We know during the Battle of Ringo Vinda that a clone trooper named Tup accidentally initiated Order 66 personally prematurely. This involved him executing one of his Jedi commanders and then being detained by the Republic. Back on Kamino, he died during a procedure to figure out exactly why his chip had malfunctioned. We know for a fact that some clone troopers were able to resist the efforts of the chip. Well, the orders from this chip may have been completely overpowering for most of the troops within the clone army. There were a handful that were able to fight this order and ultimately stand up to the influence of these chips. Now, while this was an incredibly rare circumstance, and we really only see this with a handful of clone troopers like Rex, there are still a few other examples of clone troopers standing up to the influence of the chips. And as for the influence of the chips themselves, it doesn't seem like a very pleasant process. It doesn't seem like the clone troopers simply forget everything that the Jedi have done for them, and more or less like they are simply forced almost against their will to carry out this order. Almost like some unseen forces grabbing their arms, pointing their rifles at their leaders, and pulling the trigger. So ultimately, these inhibitor chips, along with the contingency orders, which include Order 66 as well as many others, made the events of the Great Jedi Purge possible. With this great army at the command of a Sith Lord, and ultimately working directly under Jedi commanders, and having gained the trust of their Jedi commanders, it was remarkably easy for Palpatine to simply flip a switch and wipe out the Jedi Order altogether. All he really needed was an excuse to legitimately claim that the Jedi had betrayed the Republic. And on that fateful night on Coruscant when Mace Windu marched into the Chancellor's office, he gave Palpatine exactly what he needed. But I'm still looking forward to seeing more of Order 66 in The Bad Batch. Hopefully we'll get to see a little bit more of the end of the war and then Order 66 carried out in the show, so we can get an even better look at this tragic event. And Order 66 really was one of the last military orders issued by the Galactic Republic. It would soon be replaced by the Galactic Empire, and the galaxy would change for good. If you want to learn about some of the tactics Palpatine used to convince the galaxy as a whole to accept the rule of the Empire, I'll leave a link up here to my video on that. And I want you to let me know down in the comments whether you think the Bad Batch are going to carry out Order 66. Do you think they'll sort of rebel against this order, or do you think they'll follow the commands given by the chip implanted in their heads? And last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.